When I was a couple weeks short of my 70th birthday, I started thinking about my mother's mother, who lived to be 100, and her mother, who lived to be 102, and my father, who lived to be 90, longer than anyone we had ever heard of in his family. I began to think that maybe our generation could be the first to routinely live to be 100. When I talked about this at family dinner one night, my granddaughter, who was 5, said,
"What are you going to do for the next 30 years, Grandpa?"
Hello, I'm Dr. Janet Price.
And I'm Gregg Kaloustian. And we are Oldish. And this is our podcast, Oldish.
If you're oldish or know someone who is, please join us every week for conversations amongst ourselves
And our special guests
about what it means to be oldish in the 21st century.
If you ever wonder whether you're getting old, you're oldish. What are you going to do for the next 30 minutes?
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Oldish, conversations about aging in the 21st century. Hello, my name is Janet, and I'm oldish.
Hi, I'm Gregg, and I'm Oldish. We're very pleased to welcome today's guest, Mr. Stewart Lynch. Stewart is a retired educator, I think is the wrong phrase. He's still an educator, but he's retired from the public education system. He spent some time working in the private sector and then moved into the really private sector where he's presented himself as a software developer and a trainer and a YouTuber. Welcome, Stewart.
Thanks, Greg. I don't say I've retired. I say I've recareered. And I've done that a few times now because what does retirement mean? So I like to say recareering because and not necessarily reinventing, just doing what you've always done, but in a different way.
And I just want to jump in right away to say that this is exactly what we were thinking about when we started this podcast, is that in some generations, previous generations, it was you grow and grow older and retire and you're done. And
Right.
Now we're thinking about recareering, reinventing, continuing to become as we enter into oldish. So you already are talking about exactly what this is about for us. So Welcome.
Thank you. What I find always, I don't know, is disconcerting, I suppose is the word, is I think back on maybe even the first time that you and I met, Greg. I can't remember what year that would have been, but that would have been sometime in the, when?
It was in the 20th century. It was in the 1990s.
1990 sometime. And so you count
I'd say
back.
probably 97.
Yeah, I would think about 97 or so. And so what is that? That's how many? 25 years ago, right?
Yeah.
And that doesn't seem that long ago. But project 25 years in the future, it's not likely that I'm going to be here. You've got good background of family, living to an old age there, as you say in the introduction. But I'm not sure I'm going to be around another 25 years. So that's kind of scary when you think about that. So I really want to try and make the best use of my time that I have now and really sort of capitalize on my passion. So
I think is a good approach to take. And that's almost the definition of oldishness. When I started thinking about oldish as a concept, I would contrast it with old, and people that I think of as old are people who think they're done. But people who are oldish don't think that way. They think maybe, as you say, more limited time, so I better hurry up, but not done yet. I'm not done yet. That's the way I think of it, is I'm not done yet. There was the Monty Python line where in the Holy Grail, where they were taking out the dead people, and there was a guy on top of the cart, and he was saying, "I'm not dead yet." So that's kind of the way I feel. So I'm not done yet.
Well, and I'm not afraid of the word oldish either, and I'm quite proud of the fact that I can call myself oldish. And I guess one of my missions in my current life is to try and change the perceptions of younger people as to what is an older person, and to value what they have to offer. And there've been several times in my life where I felt that in the past 20 years or so, where I've kind of felt that age prejudice from younger people. And because, I'm in an industry or whatever right now where the age of the people that I communicate with on a regular basis is more in their 20s than they are in a later age. And I can remember actually, Gregg, a real specific incident when I was in Maine at the U of Maine doing some training on RAD development, which is a programming language for this software that Gregg and I used to be very familiar with. And I was at the University of Maine, and I'm teaching all these really quite young people how to create these applications on this particular environment. And the negative vibes that I got from a couple of the people right off the bat, it was like their opinion was that I had nothing to offer, because what could I, being a person at that time in my 60s, be able to offer them? And constantly there is that back and forth. And so, eventually I won them over because I persisted, and they were able to learn things from me, and in fact came up to me afterwards and had some nice things to say. But one of the things that I don't do on my YouTube channel is actually show my face. I don't, you see a lot of people who do coding kinds of tutorials where they always have a picture, themselves as a picture down the side as they're coding. I don't do that. Mine are completely, I take a long time to edit and produce my videos, but my face isn't shown at all. So people are just listening to a voice, and I don't think I sound any older than somebody who's in their 30s or 40s until I say cool or something, some word that definitely dates me.
That was pretty groovy when you said that.
It was far out anyway. but now that I've sort of been out there for close to 3 years now doing YouTube videos, people are starting to understand that I am old, and I celebrated when I turned 70. I celebrated that on Twitter, and people once they know what you have to offer, age doesn't become an issue anymore. But there's always that hump that you have to get over to allow people to do that. So I haven't gone to any conferences for a long time. And, I would really like to go to some of these coding conferences. I'd like to go to Apple and the WWDC this year coming up. And, my biggest fear is I'm just going to be standing there by myself, because nobody's going to want to come over and talk to me, because they're going to think, oh, what's this grandpa doing here, sort of thing. So, I constantly struggle with that. And it's just, I feel like I'm, the ultimate imposter.
The imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
So, one of the things that I know about you is that you're not some old guy that just started doing this. You're one of the pioneers, and you're still doing it, and that's different. You've got many years of experience doing what you're doing. You've done everything wrong 30 or 40 times, and so you really know how to do it right now in a lot of cases, because you've had that deep experience. It's impressive that you can still do it, because the overall picture of coding is, it's kind of similar, but the languages are different. The devices that the code is coming out through is they're all different from what it was when we started. I'm sure you started with an Apple something, back in the day.
Oh, I was way before that. But the interesting thing is, sure. I started back in the late 60s at university when there was no computer science. I was in the math department, and I took computer courses as part of the math department. But at that point, I didn't see any future in coding or programming. You had these punch cards, and I didn't see a future in it. So that's when I got my degree in mathematics and went and taught, and had a great career. But in about 1990, 96 or 1970 or 1982 or something like that, Apples became prevalent in schools, and I got one in my classroom. So I took what coding knowledge I had from these other languages and started to develop software programs to help me teach math, programming, or graphing concepts in my classroom. So there's always been this opportunity for me to be able to code within my job. And that always was what sort of kept me sane. But the interesting thing is that, and I don't like to say that I'm self-taught. I like to say that I'm self-directed, because self-taught sort of assumes that you're learning these things on your own, when in fact you aren't. You're learning from other people through reading or through other people's tutorials and stuff like that. So rather than saying I'm a self-taught coder, I like to say I'm self-directed, because I learn from others. And I went and I had, when I ended up getting unceremoniously dismissed from a company that we won't name, it was right at a time when Apple introduced a new coding language that was much more friendly to people to jump into coding. So I started to develop apps, and I had, I guess, 10 apps on the App Store that I coded over a period of about 4 or 6 years or something like that, or 5 years, something like that. And they were all something to scratch my own itch, something that I wanted to do, that I could help, they could help me out to do something, or help somebody else, do something. And they are all complete crap in terms of coding style. And it wasn't until I decided that I was going to start to teach people on YouTube that I really learned how to code. So you say that I've been doing it for years. For years, I was doing it wrong. And it wasn't until I started teaching that I really had to understand how things work and how to explain things. So one of the very first videos that I ever did, the theme was, it's an old Rod Stewart Small Faces song. I wish I knew what I know now when I was younger. Something like that. Do you remember that song?
Yeah.
And so that's been the theme of my videos. I want to teach people what I didn't know, the mistakes that I made. So when I teach in my videos, I don't just say, here's how something is done. Oftentimes I will go through a process of saying, here's what I used to do, but here's why that's wrong, and here's how it is doing. And as soon as you start to teach somebody how to do something, you become much better yourself at it. And I'll bet you anything you find that in your pickleball as well. When you have to teach somebody how to hold a racket, how to do something, you analyze it more yourself, and you become better at it.
Yeah.
And that's what's wonderful. That's what keeps you going, and it's fantastic.
Well, and all three of us are teachers. I'm a teacher in background before I became a therapist. There's so much you're saying that I think is really exciting, about what you're talking about as far as your life and your journey is the excitement that we can experience even as we're oldish. So the fact that you learned what you didn't know in this, I don't know, second, third phase of your journey that you might not have ever gone on. Right. You might have retired, and said, well, that was a good run. And now I'm going to, and that's not bad. But the fact that it's not wrong, there's nothing wrong about it. But the fact that you decided to jump in and do these YouTube videos and really figure out how to teach this to people. And then from that, realize that what you had done before wasn't up to what you wanted it to be. I mean, that is so exciting. And I just want to say something else while I'm thinking of it, which is when you talked about the ultimate imposter, and I was thinking, I wish there was something we could do to break through that. Like, I just started imagining all things like having conferences, like breaking through the ultimate imposter syndrome or something, because we do have so much to offer as we become oldish and have had so much experience. But like you said, that your fear of standing off by yourself on your own because nobody's looking at you and thinking, I wonder what his story is. I bet he has lots to share with me. I want to go over and talk to him.
And I think, to be fair, I'm not giving enough credit to many younger people, and I think I sort of overgeneralize there. Maybe, and it's like, whenever you get a review or a comment on a video or a piece of software, there can be hundreds of glowing reviews. You get one negative one, And that's the one that sticks with you and drives you crazy and gives you sleepless nights. And so those one or two bad experiences of interactions with people who are dismissing you because of your age, they sort of cloud it over. And I had this one comment from one of the people that were watching my videos, and he called me uncle. And I was like, oh, that's kind of weird. And so I had an interaction with him, or maybe it was on Facebook. I can't remember where it was. He says, no. He says, that's what we use as a sign of respect. So the different cultures respect elderly people far more than I think North Americans do.
Yes.
But, having said that, I perhaps I'm mistaken, and it's my own sort of perception of insecurity, I suppose, in terms of how people view me or would interact with me. But
well, and I just want to jump in for a second with my therapist hat on, which is we as oldish people have a lot to break through to feel confident because of how oldish people have been looked at and often are continued to look at in our culture. So I could imagine, that you're doing it. You got this. You've got your YouTube channel. You've got lots of followers, and yet you still have to hold on to this newish way of thinking of oldish, and be able to be at the conference and feel confident and thinking of all the positive and feedback you've gotten. But I do think this, again, like the ultimate imposter, that all of us as oldish people have to figure out how to stand confidently in who we are right now and what we have to offer.
yeah.
And also where we are. I've been thinking about this. And I used to, up until a few days ago, I thought that our culture dismissed older people, and that there was an age bias built into our culture. But I think that's less true than I thought it was. The media representation of our culture, movies, television, news shows, blah blah blah, promotes an age bias. But I don't think on a regular day on your street, the people you actually come in contact with, I don't think necessarily share that. I think that we expect them to share that. And so there's a bit of a uh-oh moment. But I think that there's an anticipation of that bias more than there is an actual bias on a local level. Our culture is not the bland white culture that television would have us think. Our culture includes the young man who called you uncle. That's our culture, or he wouldn't have been talking to you.
Yeah. There are some advantages to being old because you're non-threatening, particularly with younger women. And I found that just in sort of interactions that I've had. I go for a walk. There used to be three of us. One of the fellows just passed away suddenly, but every Thursday we would go for a walk. And they're 8-10K walks. And so they're good walks, but we always encounter different people. And, often there'll be young women walking with their children, because they're out as well. And we could strike up conversations with them and have great conversations because we're not a threat to them. If I were a young guy, and if I tried to have the same conversation with those women, they'd be more standoffish. So I'm finding that, and I have a dog, and we go for a walk every single morning, and I can talk with anybody because I'm not a threat. Nobody feels like I'm going to be coming on to them, whether they be male or female or whatever. It's really a really nice position to be in, because I'm not out to strike up any relationships with anybody. I just want to be able to talk to people and find out who they are and what they're about.
You mentioned going for a walk, and there's one thing that I told you before we started recording that you're doing that I find is kind of super oldishness, and I want to do it, and I don't know how, which is sometime within the last year or so, you learned how to swim.
Right.
And I may be the worst swimmer in history. I think if I let myself go in the water, I go directly to the bottom and need to be rescued. But so I would love to learn how to swim, but I didn't think it was even possible. But it's not, I used to think it's because I'm really tall, but you're as tall as I am. So,
Yeah.
and if you can swim, I should be able to swim. So tell us about that a little bit.
When I swim, or when I was swimming, my legs would be pointed down, not parallel with the water, unless I was in some high salted water. Up until a year ago, I had some real issues with my neck occasionally that would basically, I couldn't even lift my head and sent numbness down my arm, and it would go on I would do that. It would happen about 3 times a year and would last for 6 to 8 weeks at a time. So really, really painful. So I had to figure out a way of how to sort of keep my arms and my necks and my nerves moving. So, the idea was that you should go swimming. Well, I can't swim. So my wife was a regular swimmer, and she goes a couple of times a week. And so I started to go with her and just walk around these against the curve. They have these things that are like lazy rivers. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about. They're a current that goes around in a circle, and you can walk against them. And I would do that just because I got arthritis in my knees, and that was good for them. But anyway, that gets pretty boring. And at the pool that she went to, they had this aquafit, but those are real. It's not the scene that I'm interested in going to an aquafit class, because that makes me feel really oldish. And that's not to dismiss the benefits of aquafit, but that's not quite what I was ready for. But the reason I'm saying that is because once that finished, they got out of the pool and it was a half a length, or it was a crossway. So they put this, it must be about a 75-meter pool. No, sorry, about a 40-meter pool. And they put a bulkhead in so that the lane swimmers can swim the regular 25 meters. But on the other side, where they have this aquafit, one can, after it happens, you could swim across the pool. And that's not far to go. It's only 12 and a half meters. So this was a year ago, January, or just this past January, that I started to do this just to go across the pool. And I was just sucking air. It was awful. But I decided to do it, and, back, and I could get up to about 6 different lengths. And then my wife says, you should try one of these pool buoys or pool buoys. And they're little flotation devices that you put between your legs, Greg. And you put those between your legs, and your legs come right up. Oh. And so now I'm floating, and I can start to swim. I'm not kicking, but I can use my arms, and it's great for me. And I'm stretching my arms out, and I can make it across. So at that point, now I can start to concentrate on my breathing, which I could never do. And as soon as I got the breathing, it was like, okay, I'm taking off. And then before you knew it, we managed to go to another pool that's closer to home, where they have 6 lanes available during lane swims. 2 are slow, 2 are medium, and 2 are fast. So I decided to go into the slow lane with these 80-year-old women. We became great friends. We would chat up, and I'd put the pool buoy between my legs and swim to the other end and stay up at the other end and catch my breath again and swim back again. And there was never any competition, because they were doing their breaststroke and I'm doing my crawl or my backstroke. I made it to the other end, and I just started to build up that strength of my arms and my breath. And occasionally I would take the pool buoy out and start to swim without the pool buoy, and I'd be doing my kicking. Still not great with that. But then I ended up getting a pair of training fins as well that are really heavy, but they're only about 3 inches long past my toes, that give me a little bit of flotation, but also allow me to do the kicking so that I can travel much faster. So, long story short, here we are now. I do 40 to 50 lengths, so about 1,000 to 1,250 meters twice a week.
Wow.
Of that, probably 20 of them are with a pool buoy. 10 of them are with fins, and only the other times are without any aid at all. So it doesn't matter what age you use as long as you start swimming. And I really, really recommend that you go to a pool, grab a pool buoy, and just try it out.
Oh, that's excellent. I thought I misunderstood. I thought that you went someplace and somebody gave you lessons and there was techniques, but there's
YouTube.
Oh, there's YouTube. All right, I like that. So that actually kind of resembles something that happened to me this summer. One of my granddaughters actually changed my life because all of my grandchildren love jumping in the water, and they all say, "Come on in, Grandpa, come on in." And I can't do it because I'm going to die. So I don't do that. But a couple of years ago, I went out and I got myself a wetsuit vest to add a little bit more buoyancy, but my legs still sink. Yeah. And this summer, I even went so far, just to be on the safe side, I even went so far as to put on a life vest, a personal flotation device. And that worked pretty well, but my legs would still sink. And we were swimming with the family in a lake where the bottom was just nasty. And nobody else touched it, but because I'm so tall, my feet would go down into the nasty. And I just wasn't enjoying that at all. Yeah. And one of my granddaughters said, "Put your Crocs back on because the Crocs float." And so I got up out of the water. I put my Crocs back on. I got in the water, laid it down on my back, and all the heavy equipment that I had on up top kept my face above the water, and my feet floated. And it was a life changer. I could go and paddle around in the water with the grandkids, but I couldn't swim with them. But I'm going to try that. I'm definitely.
There's no question in my mind. And lots of people swim with these. In fact, even the master swimmers, they'll do a number of different masters lengths, with their swimming with a pool buoy between their legs, to work on their upper bodies. It's a game changer. In fact, it's a bit of a crutch now that I would rather not let it go. I'm trying to watch my heart rate as well. If I swim without anything, my heart rate goes way up. If I swim with the pool buoy, I can be much more relaxed and swim and do continual lengths. So I highly recommend it. And I'm pretty sure that the pools will be the same everywhere. There'll be slow lanes, and you get the walkers. People that just walk from one end to they got things around their waist, and they'll just sort of walk through from one end to the other. Their feet aren't touching, but they're floating. Doesn't matter. Nobody's really that judgmental at all. And I now swim actually in the fast lane because when I'm swimming, I can keep up, but I have to take more breaks. But I just keep an eye on, and usually there's maybe no more than 2 or 3 people in a fast lane. I just keep my eye on the person who's behind me, basically. And if they're getting anywhere closer to me, I just go off to the side, wait till they do their turn, and then I go off, and it's not a problem. So, yeah,
wow.
It seems like a great example of a self-directed learning.
Yeah,
that you didn't have a teacher or a program, but you used multiple ideas to get yourself out there and up swimming.
Yeah, well, I have pretty good discipline in terms of setting goals for myself and doing it. That's just sort of what I do. If I need to lose weight, I can lose weight. And it's it's something that I find I can do fairly easily. So I'm happy with that.
So you're oldish. So that's perfect. Yeah. So one of the things that I've been wondering about since we decided to talk is you're in Vancouver, Canada. You're in, and we're not. And I'm wondering whether there's a difference in oldishness in Canada from oldishness in the States.
Well, that's a good question. I don't know how to answer that. Not living in the States, so I don't really know what to compare it to. I would think it's probably pretty similar. I think it's much different in many European countries where the older people, the older generation, are much more revered. I mean, you notice there's an awful lot of of people who immigrant families who they keep their elderly people with them. They live with them or they have them with them. The big difference between Canada and the United States, from what I can see, is that people don't leave home as much. Like, people go to university in the United States and you've got so many choices, and more often than not, they are going somewhere else. So they leave home and they don't return. And I'm not even talking about living at home. I'm talking about the same city. In Canada, I mean, you're familiar with Canada. On the West Coast, we've got Vancouver, where I live, and Victoria, which is on Vancouver Island, and Kelowna, which is another sort of city that's a little bit further, 4 hours away. Those are the only three centers on the West Coast. And all three of them have universities. So you could go to any one of those three. But in order to go to another Canadian university, basically, you're having to travel some great distance. And there aren't that many major cities in Canada. You've got Calgary, Edmonton, maybe Winnipeg, but I'm not even sure about Winnipeg. Then you got Toronto, Montreal, and Ontario area. And then you're back into the Maritimes, or in Halifax, where you've got some major universities there. But there's not a lot of choice, and the distances are great. So people tend to stay around home because it's no better to go anywhere else. The weather's not any better anywhere else. We've got the best weather in Canada in Vancouver. So people don't leave. So I don't know where I was going with that. It's got nothing to do with Oldish, but something that I always find really quite interesting is that I talked to many Americans, and very few of them are living where they grew up.
Yeah.
Whereas Canadians, you tend to stay where you grow up.
So that means that you've got more family support maybe than people in the States would have. So as you're getting oldish, you know, your family is still around, and so that might make it a little bit easier. It might make it less anxiety producing around, you know, looking at the 25 or 30 or whatever number of years that you might have left. It's not unreasonable to say 10, 15, 20 years from now, I might need some more assistance. And, you know, getting through my day, getting out of the pool for one thing. And my extended family isn't here unless I go with them, you know, if I, and, you know, I don't know whether they would object to that or not, but, you know, those would be, you know, one of my choices would be, I have to leave where I live to go be closer to my family when I need their assistance.
Right.
And
see, my two
so
siblings live within 15 minutes of me. And my son is 6 blocks away.
Wow.
yeah.
So, and I don't see them moving anytime in the future, near future at all. It's just where we are.
So you might not even notice it, but you don't have the anxiety about what am I going to do?
No.
You know, which I think in the States is fairly common. It's like, well, what am I going to do? I'm going to have to give up my life to go be near my family so that they can give up their lives to take care of me. You know, that's the story that I hear. And that ain't pretty.
Yeah. I can't see my son taking care of me and my wife. You know, I'm hoping that we'll be able to move into some place that's got some sort of assisted living or something like that. There's lots of those kinds of things, and I can afford to do that. So, you know, that's good. Not everybody's in the same position.
Yeah.
I did want to ask you about something that you had written before we met, that you said something about discovering your roots and starting a new path to stay active. And I wondered that discovering your roots, if you wanted to say a little bit more about that.
Yeah, it was just, I guess, as I said, you know, I really fell in love with coding when I was at university, but there wasn't a future in it as far as I could see. So I went into education, which I really enjoyed, apart from 3 years in hell as a vice principal, but that's another story. then, so I always wanted to code. So when the opportunity arose that I was able to take an early retirement and recareer, I knew that that was going to give me some more opportunities to do that whole coding thing. And it was a real shocker to me because I had I never thought that I was going to get let go by a phone call. And that's just the way that things happen. And it wasn't reflective of my performance because I think that I was fairly well respected in that community. It just came down to dollars and money, and decisions were made. And so at that point, I'm at a loss. What am I going to do? And I've been really lucky in my life. Just the circumstances and timing all just seemed to click, and things changed at Apple that opened up opportunities for me. I was able to go back to what my initial passion was, which was creating applications. And that's what started this whole next venture for me, to get that skill and now turn it back and start to share it with others.
Yeah. It makes me think about, in our lives that we maybe, go through different experiences, different jobs, maybe different professions, and then maybe it all just comes full circle, or it all culminates in what we do as we're heading towards Oldish.
Yeah, I can't ever see myself not doing what I'm doing. And if it comes to that, I really don't know what I'm going to do. I'm certainly active doing things, and I've got family, but my wife is extremely tolerant of me because I can easily spend 4, 5, 6 hours a day at the computer just doing what I like while she manages everything else in the house and our lives. So yeah, I'm very, very fortunate, really lucky, so
Yes.
Things have worked out.
Well, it's made me think about some of the research that's talked about what makes people satisfied and content as they age. And it includes community, finding something and being involved in something that's meaningful. And, and that's what you're talking about. So I was just imagining as you were talking that you'll probably be able to do this in some capacity for as long as you're healthy enough to do so. Right now it's the YouTube venture. At some point it might be mentoring, who knows, but.
Well, yeah, actually, interestingly enough, I just got a call from Apple last week and just have signed up with them to do teaching. I was what was called an Apple Distinguished Educator when I was in schools. And so now I'm sort of turning that back, and I'm going to be teaching educators and mentoring students on coding through the Apple Distinguished Educators program. So opportunities are just happening.
Yeah. Talk about full circle.
Yeah, that's great.
All right. We do have a couple of questions we'd like to ask each of our people we have conversations with. One, it's about what about becoming oldish is scary? And then two, what about being oldish is exciting? And I know you've kind of touched on both of those, but I just wanted to bring that specifically in that way to you.
Oh, so what's scary? Was that the first one?
Yes.
Yeah. What, not having the health or not being able to do things spontaneously like I used to do. For example, going up and down rocks to the beach and being afraid I'm going to fall, and knowing that it's going to take me a heck of a long time to recover, way more than it used to. And so my whole balance and things I'm finding is becoming a bit more suspect. And I don't like that. I don't like that at all. And that's, I guess, why I'm trying to stay as fit as possible, because that's a scary prospect for me, to lose my mobility. But what do I like about being old? I like not having to go to a job and do things that on somebody else's call, being able to do what I want to do. But that's more, I would hate to be oldish and not have the means to do what I want to do. And as I said, I'm extremely lucky to be able to afford to do the kinds of things that I want to do, to travel and enjoy life and to be able to give back to others and not have to worry about where the next dollar is coming from. And I worked hard all my life to be able to reach this point, and I've got pensions and life is good.
That's great.
Yeah.
Life is good.
Yep.
Just one thing that I have to mention is that I ended up getting an e-bike last year. And my wife and I are pretty avid cyclists, road cyclists. And we would often go out and do these 40K rides, once or twice a week. And I live on the side of a mountain. So it's that last hill home that was getting tougher and tougher every year. And we'd be cycling along and some person on an e-bike would cycle by us. And I always say, cheater, what a cheater, And people say, you getting an e-bike? I said, no, I'm not old enough for one of those yet. And we took a couple for a test drive last year and we ended up buying them. And it has changed our biking. We bike twice as much as we ever used to for at least the same distances. 90% of the time, the power is off. So there's no throttle on these things that you can turn the power on or power off. The power is off, but when I need that power, it's there. And so I guess one of the things about being old is don't be afraid to accept the accessories that you need to be able to fulfill your life. And I think that's really key. You've got to be able to accept that maybe you need some assistance and don't be too proud.
I like it.
Yes, very wise.
Yeah. So you get to be a wise uncle.
Yeah, I guess so. Well.
That's good. That's good.
Is there anything else you wanted to say, Stewart, while you're here that we haven't thought to ask you?
No, I've really enjoyed the conversation. No, I've always enjoyed Gregg. I have to say, Gregg and I were oldish with the crew that we used to sort of be with in our past lives, and we'd always sort of joke about it. There was another fellow who's no longer with us. Remember what's his name? Gregg. It doesn't matter his name. But we would be at these meetings, and we would be the oldest people in the group, and we'd always sort of just try and figure out which one of us was the oldest. But so we've been oldish for a while in our relative with peers that we've associated with, but we've done okay.
Yeah, we've done okay with it. Yeah, well, there's a thing about the when we first were in it, the computer business was all kids.
Yeah.
And the computers in education, I think was different because the people who first got involved in computers in education in the mid 90s were people who were teachers of something else, and became attracted to the technology and to the uses of the technology in education. And so fairly often I would run into the technology director was someone who was the first one who knew how to print.
Right.
And so people would go and say, hey, how do you print? And, 2 weeks later, they're the technology director of the school district, because they were oldish, were older than young people. You couldn't go to college when we started doing this. You couldn't go to university and get a degree in computers. People used to say to me all the time, why don't you go and get a degree in computers? And I said, well, because by the time I finished the degree, the stuff that I learned is out of date already, because stuff changes so rapidly in the technology that I might learn how to set up a network today and in a classroom, and 3 years from now, when I'm trying to set it up in the real world, it's all different. So what's the point? I should just learn how to do what there is, what there's out there now, rather than go back, because the instructors were teaching you stuff that they learned 5 to 10 years ago, and that stuff is all obsolete already.
Yeah, and there's a certain amount of truth to that. That's for sure. Yeah.
So, but then it became all youngsters, and we were definitely old, and that other guy was was also old. And we'd sit off. We'd go to conferences and we'd be off by ourselves because the kids wouldn't talk to us.
Yeah, well, that's what I've been talking about.
Stuart, it was great to meet you. It was
Yeah, you
great to
too.
spend time with you.
Yep. Well, I'll continue to look forward to your podcasts when they come out. It's part of my walk routine with my dog. We listen to Oldish and other podcasts. So,
Well,
yeah, I've really enjoyed it. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you, Stuart.
Yeah, nice to have met you.
thanks. Stuart.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. That's it for now. Thanks to our guest, Stewart Lynch. We had a great time. You can find a link to Stewart's YouTube channel in the show notes. Thanks for listening. If you like what you heard, please tell a friend. If you'd like to hear more, check out our other episodes. Follow us wherever you prefer to listen to podcasts, and come back weekly. Ratings and reviews greatly appreciated. Tune in November 1st, when our guest will be author Erin McHugh. We'll talk about her new book, Pickleball is Life. You can support our podcast in the fight against Duchenne muscular dystrophy by buying an Everest End Duchenne t-shirt or commemorative flag or one or more of the books Gregg has written at Gregg's website. To get more information on Dr. Janet and or Gregg, check out the show notes for links to our websites. You can reach us with comments, suggestions, or requests at oldish@canoncom.com. It will always be true that the most fun I ever had playing pickleball was just us hitting the ball back and forth and laughing on the little court next to the library with the river flowing by and the eagles wheeling overhead.